So without any further ado, we're going to link to China. John Zeng is going to join us. He manages operations in China at GlobalData's Automotive division, and he has over 25 years of experience in the automotive industry. John, I was reading your CV, and it's a highly impressive CV. It's so long. You've been consulting in so many areas. You talk at many conferences. You get quoted, and you do presentations on TV channels and radio channels all over the world. You're almost like a celebrity out of China. So we're really looking forward to your presentation. And I'm not going to even do any more than that. I'm going to hand over to you. Welcome to us in South Africa, and we're really looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you for the introduction. Good to have this opportunity to share our view on Chinese markets. I think I know, particularly as dealership groups, you have interest on all the Chinese brands, how they operate, how their situation is. So I'm gonna spend 15 minutes to quickly overview what's going on here. Can you see my screen now? So can you see it? Yeah. Okay. The first slides, I'm going to give you a quick overview on the plug-in LV production. Here is the map in terms of global LV production sites. You can see there's lots of dots in US, in Europe, and China. But you can see there's the size. There's many dots in China, and the size of dots is much bigger than that in US or Europe. The size of the dot is the capacity of the plant. So all these dots are for the plug-in LVs productions. So you can see in China the size and the location of the plants are much more than that in US or in the Europe. In Europe market, you see lots of dot there, but they are still in early stage. They're quite small in terms of the size. But the Chinese demand is the primary consumer of Chinese-built BEVs at the moment. We saw lots of Western mediums cover the story about overcapacity for NEVs in China. But when we look at the capacity utilization rates for the top-ranking MEV manufacturers like BYD, their utilization rates are above 80%. So it's quite a healthy level. So here's a comparison about the penetration rate of NEVs in major regions. If you look at China comparing to Europe and the US, the size of the China is more than double than that in Europe, and then Europe is then about double the size than US. But so far, if you look at the growth rate in China BEV markets, I think among the three major economy entities, China's BEV market still remain the fastest growth rate. One of the reasons behind that is China is backed up by the supply chain. On the top 10 battery manufacturers, 6 of them are located in China. Okay, then I will quickly goes to the Chinese productions. Yeah, so you can see China production here. If you look at here, is the monthly productions. So the blue bar part is the the one used for export. So you can see Chinese production at the moment is remain healthy growth rate. I think if you look at the growth rate from end of last year, last quarter was 16% growth rate, and the Q1 this year maintained a 7%. So far, I think China accounts for 32% of the global PV productions in Q1 2024. So it's the largest car manufacturer globally. In terms of brand competition, I think here's the one probably you want to look a bit in details. I think so far, although Chinese market is the largest market globally, I think we're talking about 22, 23 million units a year. But it's also the most competitive market. There are over, if you look at the car brands, there are over 200 brands competing in Chinese markets. In terms of includes almost all the global brands, and there's lots of Chinese brands as well. But one of the most interesting phenomena, if you look at, is Volkswagen Group. They used to be the #1 market leader in China in the last 4 decades. I think if you look at their highest market share in China, they used to up to 25%. But in last 5 years, their market share declined rapidly. They're being catch up by Chinese brand like BYD. If you look at the latest data in Q1, Volkswagen Group, Volkswagen's brands is barely able to maintain a 10% market share in China. So they have been surpassed by BYD. So the other international groups like Toyota or Honda, they face a similar challenge as well. For example, Toyota's market position has been passed by Chang'an Group. So if you look at the growth rate, because if you look at the chart, we are looking at the market share versus their growth rate. There's lots of Chinese brand. They maintain a very high growth rate, like Huawei's brands, Huawei, Wuling, Lenco, Cherry. They all maintain like 70 to 110% growth rate in Q1 this year. But if you look at international brand like Honda, Toyota, BMW, or Mercedes, or even Tesla, we have seen their market growth as negative in Q1. NEV is continued to be the spotlight, and if you look at their growth rate, the penetration rate is now 43% in April. If you look at the NEV market, we use the similar chart like the previous one we showed. Use the market, we look at the brand's market share and their growth rate. You can see a quite different picture here. BYD alone, they took about 28% in first 3 months, the Q1. BYD plus Tesla plus Huawei, they took about 42% already. So in NEV market, we actually saw a more competitive situation. The top 3 brands took over 40%. So that means all the other, there's over 130 brands compete in NEV markets in China. So with top 3 took over 42, that means there's over 130 brands are competing for the rest, about 58% of the market share. So the competition in China is fierce. And what does that mean? That means that many of the brands couldn't survive in my opinion, they couldn't survive in the market for the competition for another 5 years. I think in next 5 to 10 years, half of the brands will disappear in this market. I think as dealerships, that means that you're gonna have to make a very careful choice. There are lots of brands in China. And many of them want to go overseas, and you have to be very careful because there's overcrowded in this market. And I wouldn't imagine all these 130 brands could survive in this market for another 5 years. So in terms of penetration rate, you can see if you look at last year, when the average NEV penetration rate is 34%, the leading Chinese OEMs they normally have 100% to 60, 50%, but international OEMs like GM, they only got about 22%. They lagging behind of the market pace. So charging facility, I think, is one of the another reason that's back up the Chinese NEV market's development. And you can see public charging piles by April this year is nearly 3 million in China. If you count all the private charging piles, there's over 9 million charging piles in China already. So that's I think that's about more than 10 times in the US, in Europe, and almost 20 times more than that in the US market. So the infrastructure is one of the reasons that back up Chinese markets. So in terms of technology, we look at in China, we look at the IC only market is shrinking rapidly. In fact, we probably will see the NEV segment will pass 50% market share by next year. That will make China the first major market. When we're talking about market over 20 millions, 50% means that the NEV sales will pass 10 million a year. That will be the first major market past 50%. And that means that IC car manufacturers in China are facing significant challenges. They are losing market share quickly. And also, if you look at on that part, we saw the overcapacity on IC segments. Actually, we saw a few international OEMs in China this year. They have to shut down their plant for 2 or 3 months because their orders cannot fill in their plant capacity this year. So the market is expanding fastly, but it's also changing very quick, bring quite challenging situation for both OEMs and dealerships. So one of the other challenges that in China, although we saw the electrification already bring quite strong challenge to the traditional car manufacturer already, but we saw another big challenge coming to China today is the internet giants like Huawei and Xiaomi. they came to the market quickly, and they are very successful. I think this is and we only saw that happen in China, because in European market or in US market, we never saw another similar case. We didn't see Google or Apple success in auto sectors, and we did not see that happen in Europe. But in China, Huawei and Xiaomi, they came to the market and they quickly become the market leaders. Huawei's Huawei's Idol brands is now the leading brands in premium markets. They bring a significant challenge to BMW and Mercedes. Xiaomi, they decide to come to the market 3 years ago, and in last month they officially launched their first model, SU7, SU7. I think their capacity being quickly filled. I think they will run out about 120,000 units in the first year they launched. That's very impressive achievement, considering how difficult the other international brands face in China. So what they bring to the consumer is the autonomous driving experience. For example, Huawei is targeting to launch L4 levels autonomous driving cars by next year, and L5 by 2030. So all this international giants movement, they change the game. I think for many international OEMs in China, they have difficulty to catch the electrification already. So when Huawei and Xiaomi can join the game, it's quickly push the game to next level. You have to invest a lot on autonomous driving, which means that's capacity or capability beyond traditional OEM's knowledge. So I think that's is the real challenge when we see Huawei and Xiaomi come to the market. I think that's will be the really game changer. I think that's is much tougher game for the traditional OEMs, even for BYD or Volkswagen. Yeah, so it's quite difficult, and they are competing with Tesla in terms of that area. So we will see Tesla is now working on to push the FSD V12 version of autonomous driving to China. I think they are working on that. But of course, because of all this data transferring issue, I think they still need to figure out how to get that to China. I think it's quite challenging for Tesla to do that, but they're working on that. So in terms of the export, you can see China is now back to say 4 or 5 years ago. China's capacity is mainly for domestic consumption. The export from China has been still around for 1 million units a year for quite a long time. But since 2 or 3 years ago, you can see Chinese export ramp up quickly. One of the reasons is Chinese OEMs volume pick up in China rapidly, and the international OEMs, on the other hand, their volume declined quite quick in China, because in quite long time in China before 2022, the international OEMs, they are subject to 50-50 joint venture regulation. That means that all the international OEMs facilities in China, they have to form a 50-50 joint venture with Chinese OEMs. So we start regulation there. international OEMs are not willing to use China as export hub, because if you export from China, that means that you have to share your global market with Chinese OEMs. So for quite a long time, international OEMs are not willing to use China as export hub. So from 2022 onwards, that regulation has been removed. International OEMs are allowed to set up 100% export facilities in China. They can set up 100% ownership facility in China. So Tesla is the one. They have 100% controlling share on their Chinese plant. BMW also increased their controlling share in Chinese facility from 50% to 75%. So that's why you saw that they are willing to increase the export volume from China because they are able to increase their share in China as well. So I think that's one of the factors why they are willing to export from China now. So you can see from 2019 to now, I think especially after 2022, PV export from China increased dramatically. If you look at 2022, China export 2.4 million, and 2023 over 4 million. I think the top export group are Chery, SAIC, Geely, and BYD. And of course, Tesla is one of them. They export 100% BEVs. But then you can see lots of international OEMs are now export from China, including Hyundai, GM, Ford, BMW. Yeah, but interesting to see Chery, although they are the number one export Chinese group, but 99% of the model they export to overseas market are actually IC cars. Only 1% export from Chery are NEVs. Yeah. This is the top models. In terms of the aerial China export, you can see in the first 4 months, Russia is the largest single markets, and then they have Mexico and Brazil follow that. But if you look at the by region, European market is actually quite big, represent 16%. And Middle East is about 15%. Southeast Asia and Australia all combined, they account for 25% of Chinese exports. So that's the latest exports footprint from China. I think in terms of Chinese productions in Chinese export in the country's capacity, China is still quite low comparing to other major car export countries like Germany and Japan. If you look at 2023, the German export account for 74% of their capacity. Japan's exports account for 42% of their production capacity, while in China, the export only account for 14%. So at the moment, Chinese capacity there's only 14% of the capacity for export market. So it's relatively low comparing to other major industry countries. Yeah. So I think that's the content I would like to share with you all. I think I will spend rest of the time for Q&A if you have any question left.
Hi, John. It's Brandon. When we chatted last week, you told me about some new vehicles that can do up to 2,000 kilometers on a charge. Can you explain that one to the audience? I think it's really interesting.
Oh yeah, I think that's regarding the technology roadmap. I think we can relate it to one of the slides I have here. So if you look at these slides, we have quite big part is called PHEV, PHEV. Um, the blue part, one of the model BYD launched called the Qin, QIN. That's one of the model come from their the Dynasty series. Qing is one of the Asian kingdom in China, back to like 2 or 3 thousand years ago. So they launched this Qing, used the PHEV technology. They call it a DMI5. Um, by that technology, they allow the drivers to buy a single charge and with full tank of gas. You can drive over 2,000 kilometers. Uh, you don't need to add gas or charge your battery. Uh, so per 100 kilometers per hour, per 100 kilometers fuel consumption is about 3 liters. So that's the latest technology they have. I think that model has been huge successful, well accepted by the market. So far, I saw the news that they already received over 100,000 orders in first month. So that's a huge success. I think Chinese OEMs are competing on BEVs, PHEV, and the EREV. PHEV, of course, comparing to EREV, they are a bit complicated in terms of technology. You got engine, you got transmission, you got the battery as well. But we with this DMI technology, traditional people think that the PHEV is more expensive. But what amazing part is that BYD is able to lower this car. I think this is the retail price in China to just around 100,000 RMB. I think that's about um, like somewhere around 12,000 US dollar. Yeah, that's that's the that's the engine price they asking for. So that's one of the factors that make this model so popular. It's bring the price more affordable, and it's give you an incredible driving mileage. Yeah.
John, we have a question from our virtual audience. Chinese auto manufacturers have made big inroads into the African market. What is the future of these exports in light of the challenges facing ICE vehicle manufacturers because of the shift to NEVs?
You're talking about this for Chinese market or the market in overseas?
My interpretation would be the impact on export markets with the growth of NEVs over ICEs in Chinese production.
I think in terms of export market, we have to be careful because, as I said earlier, China so far they already have nearly 10 million charging piles across the country. That's more than 10 times in the US and more than 20 times than in the US. So not every region you have such facility to support battery car. I think that's why you have to look at the other technology options like extended range EVs, EREV means that you have a rather small battery in the car. You put the engine inside to charge the battery. That means that you can rely on gasoline to charge the battery. You don't have to rely on all the charging facilities. Of course, the P-Hive is another one. You can charge, you can use gasoline. I think that I think in terms of look at the global market, Chinese OEMs will be careful as well. BV, I think they definitely gonna look at those regions. When government have the plan to support BEVs, they have the plan to develop all the infrastructures. Then you can launch BEV in that particular markets. I think that's why so far the market goes to European market and Southeast Asian market where they have quite solid plan to support the infrastructure development. Well, if you look at the market in other part, you probably need to find out the more options like EREV or PHEV. I think PHEV fundamentally is thinking like the chain DMI 5. The user can actually use the car just like you use your traditional gasoline car. You don't even have to have a charging pile at home at all. It won't change consumers' habits. You don't have to get adapt to the BEV2 at all. You can just use it as a gasoline car. So I believe the technology like P-Hive or EREV, they definitely gonna have a strong competitiveness advantage comparing to the traditional IC cars. It's simply because it can bring you so much advantage in terms of fuel consumptions. Yeah, that's just my thought. Yeah.
May. The first is just in terms of that 130 brands that you mentioned, that of which you expect only half to survive. Is that only NEV brands or is that total brands, ICE included? And then who do you think will survive? What type of OEM will survive and who are the ones who will fail? And my second question is, there's a lot of trade duties being levied now and threatened with from the US and from Europe on Chinese imports, especially BEVs. How will that affect the Chinese export market? And how will they retaliate, possibly?
For the first question, I think if you plus the ICE car brand, there will be over 200 brands. Of course, we are talking brands. I think like Geely Group, they have many brands, right? So every group, they have like GM, they have Chevy, they have Buick, they have they have a Cadillac. So this 130 brands are the brands they are currently selling NEV cars in China at the moment. That means the brand alive at the moment. But in last couple of years, we saw many brands, including international brand and domestic brand, pull out or dying in Chinese market. We saw WM Motor bankrupt. We saw iWays. So there also some other international brands. They actually operating minimum size in China at the moment, like including Kia, Hyundai, even Ford, right? So Ford has declined from previous over 1 million a year sales in China to somewhere around 200 to 300,000 a year. Kia is now mainly using their Chinese facility for exports. But they keep doing this in China because they think that they need to survive in China in order to compete in other part of the world. So one of the new strategy for the international brands in China is they define China market as a gym. They said we need to stay in China to exercise the muscle so we can compete in other part of the world. So even they don't have many sales in China, they won't shut down their operation in China because they want to learn from here. So that's what we saw at the moment. But in terms of competition, as I showed the slides before, BYD alone, they took 1/3 of market already. When there's other internet giants like Huawei and Xiaomi, they are quickly taking the market share from the other players. So it's tough. Although it's a market over 10 million a year, but it's tough. That's why I believe there will be more and more brands disappear in this market. If you have a brand that you're selling like a few thousand or like 10,000, 20,000 a year, you wouldn't make quite long. I think at early the year we have Hi-Fi temporarily closed. It's a Chinese brand. They're selling like 30, 40,000 a year in last couple of years. So even they have an investment from Middle East, you wouldn't survive. So that's just the fact. You have to look at your volume. You have to make yourself to above like 200, 300,000 units a year. And that's why we look at the market. We believe if you are not backed up by international OEMs like a Kia, Hyundai Group, then you're going to have trouble, right? So there's 130 brands. I would think that you will be lucky to see if 50% of them can survive in 10 years' time. For second questions, I think yeah, we saw this news. They have 38% for SAIC, MG brands, but we know that Germany is actually against this proposal. I saw they sent their vice prime minister will come to China soon to negotiate the plan, and China come back with retaliation plan already. It's basically it's tariff war, but I wouldn't think it will impact on Chinese OEMs in longer term, as BYD and Chery already set up their localization plan. BYD will start up their Hungary plant by 2025. Chery will start their production in Spain by end of 2024, by end of this year. So even they have tariff for BYD, I think they will impact about bring extra costs about 1.3 billion RMB. I think that is affordable according to our business plan. So I think that's the effect that I think this tariff will squeeze out those smaller Chinese OEMs from European market. If you cannot have a long-term plan for European market, then you probably cannot make sales in that particular market anymore. So it's actually going to be a benefit for the large OEMs groups like Chery and BYD. That's my opinion. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was a very informative presentation. I don't think we realized how big the Chinese market is and what the potential impact is going to be of Chinese exports from China into like our country, into other parts of Africa, also into Europe. We know we discussed when you were on the line, we discussed the impact of the 100% tariff that had been imposed in America and what that potentially would do. So thank you very, very much. We really appreciate you logging on from China and informing us, and we really do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.